You probably already guessed, but I'm just final warning. We are getting into some very heavy subjects surrounding sex. So they have hired this prostitute to come live with them in their home who looks like their dead daughter, and they're engaging in weird sex stuff with her. Today I have two different books that I want to talk about. And while I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a direct comparison to be made between them, I do think that there is some overlap in subjects. And also because of what we know about the backgrounds of the different authors, I think that there's an interesting discussion to be had comparing these two works and the authors that created them. Just hang in there and you'll know exactly what I mean. So the first book that I want to talk about, and my first 5-star of the year, Notice by Heather Lewis. This book has an introduction by Melissa Febos, where she gives us a little bit of background on our author. Notice was published after Heather Lewis had died. As explained in the introduction, our author, Heather Lewis, had a very traumatic child. She was a victim of incest from her father. Her experience with that permeated all of the work that she produced. There was also further trauma because Heather Lewis was also a lesbian. Her father sent her to different psychiatric facilities trying to cure her. So, there's a lot here with her background as a person. It is very clearly indicated in the introduction that many of the characters in this book were heavily influenced from Heather's real life. When we get into the things that are happening in this book, you'll really feel the heaviness of that. I think reading this introduction and having that context going into it really gave this book so much more weight than I would have had otherwise. It's kind of one of those weird things where an author doesn't owe us as the reader anything. They have the willingness and the ability to create a story. They decide what sort of topics, what nuances, what commentary they want to entertain. They decide what personal influences they want to use in their stories, what they want to tweak, all of this stuff. And so when they take details from their life or influences from their life, that's their right to do, but they don't necessarily owe us an explanation that that's what it is. But at the same time, it gives context. It helps the reader be more perceptive to certain things and maybe make more connections than they would have otherwise. Readers are more likely to feel the weight and the depth of what the author's trying to share. And so for this book and the dark subjects that we're going to get into, knowing her trauma and her background, and knowing that she did take her own life, that she was an incest survivor and also struggled with addiction. Mental health and trauma and recovery, it's all so complex. But part of me can't help but think that the incredibly deep wound of being abused by her father in that way, that perhaps she was not an incest survivor so much as it just took a long time to kill her. Now, we never actually find out our main character's real first name. She just goes by Nina. Nina is a teenager, and we don't get a whole lot of insight into exactly what's going on with her parents, but her parents are never really home, and Nina pretty much does everything she can to avoid going home. She starts prostituting herself in a parking lot. As she's turning tricks, she meets this man, and he's like, "Hey, you should just come home with me." And she goes home with him and meets his wife, Ingrid. They start engaging with Nina in various sexual manners. Nina, who, like our author, is written to be, I believe, a lesbian, if not bisexual. She prostitutes herself to men for money, but she seems to be romantically more interested in women. So what she notices very quickly during these sexual encounters is that it is pretty much all performative of what he wants to do, he wants to see. Yeah. So she witnesses Ingrid going through the motions of what she is supposed to be doing when she's supposed to be doing it. What he is interested in doing involves a lot of pain, degradation, dominance, stuff like that. And at this point, there's a line in the book that says that he paid Nina enough to do things like that to her. He didn't pay her enough to watch it happen to somebody else. It becomes a situation where they, as a couple, want Nina to stay in the house, and they engage in threesomes, and he just kind of does different things. But when he goes to work, then the two women spend time together. You come to find out Ingrid and her husband had a daughter who's dead, and Nina actually looks a lot like their daughter. Part of her wants to leave, not because of what's happening with her sexually per se, but because of how deeply uncomfortable it makes her seeing what's happening to Ingrid. It's basically where Ingrid reminds her so much of herself. It's like holding up a mirror. Having to see her reflection is the part that makes it hard for her. However, because she didn't want to go home, and part of her did want to stay, there's an affection growing between Nina and Ingrid. And so when Ingrid's husband, he goes off for a while for business, for his job, and they kind of talk about running away together. And then one day Nina wakes up. The guy's still away for work, but Ingrid's gone because Nina simply would not agree to go with her. So Ingrid just left. And so Nina, being there alone, puts a fire under her ass. So she ends up leaving, and in a shocking turn of events, this man is not happy. Ingrid and Nina are not there when he gets home. He is able to track down Ingrid. Nina, he tracks her down, but he doesn't drag her back to the house. He just reports her because she just goes back to the parking lot and goes back to work. Calls the police on her, and she ends up doing some time in jail for prostitution. And then this is where she meets Beth. Now, Beth is a counselor who tries to help her get out of jail. The heart of this book is surrounding her relationship with Beth as she is continuing to go to counseling. And Beth is trying help her, not just to turn over a new leaf, but just to help her with her mental state, despite the fact that Beth is married. An attraction develops between Nina and Beth. There is so much heavy shit in this book. This entire story is written in a bit of a emotionally dampened state. However, I think compared to something like Hog, which I reviewed in my last video, which I was so upset because the main character had no thoughts in his head, and I was just very frustrated reading that because our main character didn't even seem like a person, and this isn't like that. Typically, you would say that good writing will show, not tell. But I think when you're trying to write a character that by nature of who they are and how they're behaving, they're not showing their emotions, it kind of puts you in this position where you kind of have to tell us at least a little bit. You have to give us something, otherwise how are we supposed to know? So for me, this book felt so much more satisfying because I had an idea of what was going on in her head. She would say things like, this man tells me to do this, and I know that I shouldn't, but I just sort of do it. It's giving us some context to understand her motives and her thought process, even when it's not fully fleshed out even when it's not logical or doesn't make sense. It gave me what I needed to feel like I at least understood that this character isn't actually empty inside, because we recognize that this is somebody with a lot of baggage. A lot of baggage, a lot of trauma, and we understand that these things influence her decisions. For example, when Nina runs away after she sees that Ingrid left and she decides to run away as well, she doesn't actually go anywhere. She leaves the house, but she just goes back to her old place. And she goes back to picking up men in the parking lot. And so, of course, Ingrid's husband knows exactly where to look for her. And we understand because we're given some context. There's a part of her that recognizes that this is dangerous and it's stupid. But there's just this thought in her head where part of her wants to be found. And we might not as completely understand why, but we understand that she is having these sorts of thoughts, that there is some sort of internal conflict, that she does have thoughts in her head. And because of that internal struggle where she knows she feels a certain way or she wants a certain thing, but much of the time she doesn't understand herself why she's doing what she's doing, or why she said that, or why she didn't do this, or whatever. She's also confused why she's going through the motions of certain things. And if we weren't told that, her behavior alone would never explain. It would never be enough for us to understand. Sometimes the way that people deal with circumstances that feel like it's outside of their control, they try to do what they're supposed to do. They try to play their role. You find Ingrid, for example, even when her husband's not there, and it's just her and Nina, she's asking for things from Nina that she clearly doesn't like. When she's engaged with those activities with her husband, certain things clearly hurt her. And that's very obvious to Nina. So why would she ever ask for something that causes her pain when it's not being forced on her? Right? Like if it's just her and Nina, there's no reason for her to ask for something that she doesn't like. Sometimes the way that people cope with things like that is they convince themselves that they do like it. You know, kind of fake it till you make it. However, this is more of like, you never make it. You're just continuing to fake it, and you're almost not allowing yourself to believe that you don't like it, because that would make the times when you do have to do it more painful. You're trying to trick yourself into thinking you have some agency in the situation. And for her, it's like Nina's doing this for work. Ingrid, this is her marriage. This is her life. You would rather kind of suffer and maybe get a sorry later than stand up for yourself and have them be angry at you. It feels safer to just sort of suffer in silence. So there's this psychology behind, it's okay for me to be in pain. It's okay for me to be treated like trash, because that's what I'm here for. You know, as a prostitute, it's like her self-worth is, I'm here for you to treat like trash in exchange for money. What you think is going to develop into a more long-lasting, intense relationship never really does. There is a connection there that doesn't go away. But when Nina meets Beth, Beth is the one that she has real, genuine feelings for. And then you see as her relationship with Beth, who, ooh, you know, I told you that Beth is a counselor, and I, like, look, you know, this may not have been the point of the story, but I knew, okay, when she first goes to start seeing Beth, and they're having their counseling sessions, and Beth is, like, trying to help her or whatever, and there's, like, this weird back and forth between them where there's these little moments of intimacy, a hug, a look that kind of lingers longer than it should. Nina gets upset and wants to leave, and Beth goes and grabs her arm and kind of just holds her for a little bit, and it's kind of crossing the line between what you would normally experience with a counselor, I would imagine. But you would like to think, because you're seeing this from Nina's perspective, you're like, okay, maybe Nina is just reading into these things a little bit more than she should, because she ain't quite right. She has a very weird relationship with affection. She uses sex as a distraction, thinks it's okay for her to feel worthless and to be treated like she is, and that's just normal for her. She's got a lot of issues, right? But then Beth, you know what Beth does? Eventually, like, I don't even want to use the word romance, some stuff goes down between them. And Beth, I am so disappointed. Beth, that is not how a counselor is supposed to behave, Beth. I got a like I never liked. I'm not on board with Beth. Like, it's this complicated. There's so many layers to this, and if you read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. I don't want to spoil everything. It just, like a lot of stuff rubs me the wrong way, but people who abuse positions of power, you're supposed to be helping her. And if you, a married woman, by the way, married to a man, like if you start to develop feelings and stuff, the proper course of action is to stop being her counselor, to get her a new counselor or something. Like you are like, oh, Beth, what the fuck? Like I just know you listen to me. Now I know that there's going to be people who's like, oh, but it's a love story and they fell in love and maybe Beth, was a secret lesbian and her husband and blah blah blah. I don't give a shit. Like, listen to me, look at me. If Beth was a man and he was cheating on his wife, taking advantage of his patient, there would be no difficulty recognizing that that is fucked up, that was way fucked up. And, oh, you think we're going to sit here and be like, oh, but it's a woman, so all of these excuses. Not on my watch! Absolutely not! That behavior is unacceptable, and the fact that she's a woman is completely irrelevant. I don't care if she's a secret lesbian. She's cheating on her husband. She's abusing her patient, using her power as a counselor. It is unacceptable. Beth sucks. Beth fucking sucks. I don't even care that it starts off with her wanting to help and trying, because it goes off the rails. It goes off the rails. Beth is not a good counselor. She is not a good friend. She's not a good wife. Beth fucking sucks. Beth sucks, and it pisses me off because I don't think that Beth knows she sucks. And I don't like... Oh. I get upset when people take advantage of other people who are vulnerable. I get very upset when people abuse their power to take advantage of somebody who is looking to them for help. Nina is incredibly vulnerable in so many ways. The last thing that Nina needed was someone else using her for sex. I think at this point in her life, she needed a friend. She needed that type of love. Someone who didn't want anything from her. Somebody that she could not use sex as a distraction, as a way to... Because for her, it's like, sex is hard with women because it makes her actually feel something. And when it's with men, because she's presumably a lesbian, it's just work. And she's able to kind of just go elsewhere in her mind and play her role, which is the whore. What she would have needed is stability. Reading this book, it just felt like everybody was letting her down. And even the women in her life who there was this illusion that maybe they gave a shit or maybe they could help her, but they were also just selfish. And the entire time, everyone is just using each other, trying to get their own needs met. She's playing a role. and she seems to have no concept of being loved and appreciated for herself. Her value is if somebody wants a whore, she can be a whore. And that's just normal to her now. Reading this book from the perspective of somebody with the background that we talked about, with the mental health struggles that we talked about, who is no longer here. Somebody who, I guess you could say she died due to mental illness, however you want to phrase that. That in this book that is, according to the introduction, largely influenced by her own life and her own perspective on things, is that at no point does she stop internalizing all the blame for everything bad that happens to her. That's something that I noticed, is that the entire time it's about, what am I supposed to say in this instance? What am I supposed to do in this instance? And there's nothing organic about anything. And I think that maybe is part of the reason why does she go back to the parking lot after she leaves the house with Ingrid's husband, and she escapes. And she goes back to the parking lot. Because in her brain, she still views herself the same way. And she's like, okay, well, what is the whore supposed to do? She goes back to the parking lot. Which will lead us into our other book, which again is not exactly the same. Comparatively less heavy, but I do think that there's a lot of overlap in subjects. So I read Half His Age by Jennette McCurdy. I actually listened to the audio version of this, and that is narrated by Jennette McCurdy. If you are not familiar, she is a former child actress. She was some Disney show. The woman who wrote I'm Glad My Mom Died. Even if you haven't read that, you've probably heard of it. Half His Age is her second published book. I'm Glad My Mom Died is directly from her life. You get background on Jennette McCurdy. There is a lot of religious trauma, a lot of mental health struggles with OCD, EDs, her mother guilting and shaming her to act to make money for the family. I watched an interview from her the other day. If any of you are familiar with on YouTube, Last Meals, she specifically talked about how when she was around 8 years old, for the LDS, the Mormons, something about the Holy Spirit is supposed to fill you when you're 8 or something. And she, as an 8-year-old, had OCD. She thought that all of these compulsions that she had was the Holy Spirit, and how confusing that was as a child. And just, yeah, so she had a very traumatic childhood, not necessarily in comparison to Heather Lewis, but a very difficult, traumatizing childhood between religious trauma and, like I said, mental health struggles, OCD. She struggled with EDs into adulthood, and just a lot of stuff going on with her. Half His Age is a pretty standard story when it comes to the base description. It's about a 17-year-old girl named Waldo who's like, ooh, look at this older teacher, Mr. Corgi. Yeah, Corgi. Hell yeah, love that name. And Waldo decides that she actually would really like to be with Mr. Corgi. A crush would be an understatement. Like, she is just determined. She really wants to be with Mr. Corgi, who is a married older man, her creative writing teacher. And so this is not a super unique premise, but I would argue that the execution of it is a little bit different than what you're probably used to. This is not written like Waldo was groomed. This very much comes across like this is a girl who views herself as white trash, who is very insecure about that. She buys things compulsively to deal with her stress and her fears and anxiety, and that's how she copes with it. Yeah, she views herself as white trash, but she kind of hooks up with guys. She finds it generally very unfulfilling. I think that's part of the reason why she develops these feelings. I think one of the reasons why teenage girls, why they often will get crushes on older men, it's not just because they look handsome. That's one of the things that you come to understand as you grow up, is that just because a man is a little bit older does not mean that he is mature. And I think sometimes teenage girls, they make that mistake of thinking that, like, oh, a mature man is going to be a mature man. And it's like, well, I mean, sometimes, but not always. I don't know. Maybe this is just me, but I would find it incredibly strange for a teacher in high school to invite me over for dinner, like with his wife. His wife is there. But he does that. Nobody's acting like that's weird, but like the only way that wouldn't be weird would be if it was a group of students. To me, I don't know, maybe that's just me. I don't know. He just invites her because he likes her writing. Waldo doesn't give a flying fuck about writing. She doesn't care about it in the slightest, but she wants Mr. Corgi. And so she pretends to give a shit about writing. And that is part of the reason why he notices her, is her writing. Ultimately succeeds in seducing him. It's rough going, though, I have to say. Like, he does not jump right on board. Like, he really does tell her, like, hey, no, hey, you need to leave. Hey, I'm married. Unfortunately, he does end up being a little bitch, and he does not stick to his guns. And it's unfortunate because I think the biggest mistake you can make in that situation, as the older person, is admitting any sort of attraction or affection for the younger person. Like, even if you do, like, shamefully think that they're attractive, you don't admit that. You don't give them that, because that's the thing that really puts her over the edge. Once she knows that he wants her, she's like, I don't care how you feel about that. I don't care if you like want me or you don't want to want me. All I need to know is that you want me. And now I know that if I just keep pushing, eventually you'll give it. And he does, which is a bitch move. So that is unfortunate. That ultimately is on Mr. Corgi, but like our girl here, Waldo, was not groomed. Like, she was giving it her all. Like, she really, really. And so then she kind of becomes his side hoe. And it's this complicated thing where she's accepting being the side chick, but she's like, I can't have as much time with him as I want. And because he's my teacher, I can't be seen in public with him. And sometimes his wife calls when we're together and he has to answer. And it's like, ugh. But I want time. And she gets all in her feels, ultimately thinking that she will be happy being the side chick. And she's not. And so, she just keeps pushing for more and more and more. Stuff happens. I guess I'll leave it at that. This book definitely has a much less heavy tone compared to Notice. But where we're getting into some overlap between these things, using sex like a band-aid. That sex isn't something that you're enjoying like a real intimacy, and that your emotions are a part of that experience, but rather sex is a physical activity that distracts from emotions. And something I have to shout out to Jennette McCurdy about is in her audio presentation of this, she was reading very fast. Like, I don't, some people I know they listen to audiobooks at like 1x the speed. I don't do that. I listen at normal speed. But like, if I didn't know better, I would think she was 1x the speed. Like, she, which I think is a very intentional choice that was meant to sort of mimic the anxious voice that Waldo has. That Waldo is a very fast-paced, like million thoughts in her head type person. And so it made sense for Jennette McCurdy to read this in a very brisk, to the point, very fast, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. I thought it worked really well once I understood the main character and her personality and everything. I thought it was a direct reflection of that. Like we were talking about with the last book, playing the roles. Now for her, Waldo, she wants Mr. Corgi. It's not about her just being herself and seeing if they get along, right? Because she has to manipulate the system trying to make this work. She's battling uphill trying to get this man, right? And so again, what am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to act? And Waldo is figuring out how to keep a man. How to keep a man when you're not creating a genuine organic bond. And it's basically like, yeah, you have to always be in a good mood, never be a downer, never ask for anything that he doesn't feel like giving you anyway. Be grateful for whatever scraps he does give you. Do not complain. Make him feel the way he wants to feel. And there's a line in this book: nothing scares a man like what a woman wants from him. That's a line that her mother says to her in the book. And so, yeah, it's basically like your role, especially as the side chick, is to be a reprieve from his bitch wife, who actually, and that's the thing, is that, like, his wife isn't actually a bitch. His wife is a little bit uptight, but we view her as emasculating to him because she has expectations. Like, she'll ask for things. Will you do this for me? Hey, last time you did this, could you do this instead? And she feels disappointed sometimes when he comes up short. And none of that is stuff that Waldo can do, because none of that is stuff that makes him feel good. Not allowed to make him feel like a disappointment, which means that you're not allowed to be disappointed regardless of what he does or doesn't do. So for her, it's like asking for more time. Well, he might not be able to do that, so she better not ask for that, because she doesn't want to come across like she's complaining or that he's not good enough. And that is what we're really getting into with this book, is that all of these fantasies do not have a single fucking thing to do with the other person at all. It's literally about yourself. You're fantasizing about how that person sees you. Right? From Mr. Corgi's perspective, maybe Waldo's pretty, like a pretty young girl, fucking whatever. But really, what he wants from her is that he's a creative writing teacher who wanted to be a writer, but didn't make it. And he is fantasizing about this world where this young woman is looking up to him, admiring him, and that he is a good writer. He's inspired, that he feels young again. He's handsome, attractive to this young woman, that she looks up to him. It's about how he wants to feel through the lens of her. And it's the same thing for Waldo. It's not about Mr. Corgi. It's about how she wants to feel. A 17-year-old, her home life, not great. She's having to take on very adult responsibilities because dad's out of the picture, mom's a bit of a hot mess. And so she wants this teacher to look at her and to think that she's not white trash. She likes the idea of, through the lens of this teacher, that she's smart, that she's capable, that she's interesting, that she's valuable, that she's special. And she wants to see all of that through the lens of him. Through herself, those are all of her insecurities. And that's why it doesn't matter that she doesn't give a shit about writing. To her. Like, to her, it doesn't matter because she's just trying to get him to like her. So the fact that she's performing and lying, it's just a means to an end. It doesn't matter. But for Mr. Corgi, it's like, from his perspective, she looks up to me. She thinks I'm good at writing, and she's inspired by me. And it would be very disappointing to him for her to not give a shit about writing. You get what I'm saying? That these fantasies that these people are creating about each other don't have anything to do with the actual person. The fantasy is all about who I am in this scenario. That version of me. What is the version of me that would be appealing to this 17-year-old girl? And the fantasy is that he gets to be that person. And vice versa for Waldo. It's so understandable and yet so sad. Waldo genuinely thinks that this is about Mr. Corgi in the moment. It's very transparent when you see. It's literally exactly like her shopping addiction, where she buys things and she's complaining the entire time throughout the book of she gets overwhelmed with stressing and anxiety. So she goes online and buys a bunch of shit, or goes to a store and buys a bunch of shit that she doesn't even want. She'll buy clothes that aren't even in her size. She just buys all these things and then immediately regrets it and knows she's going to have to return it. But it's something about buying the things is fulfilling to her, and it kind of comes across, again, maybe because she's lives in a trailer and feels like white trash, that there's something therapeutic to her about pretending to be somebody who can afford to buy all this shit. There's something about buying things, regardless of whether or not she wants it, that alleviates something for her. Once she actually gets the stuff, it's like, ugh. It's like disappointing for her. She didn't actually want the stuff. She just wanted the high of purchasing the stuff. It's complicated because it definitely, our main character is not super likable much of the time. Bordering on arrogant, very judgmental. The ending, whoa. I was like, I mean, I don't know if it's a controversial opinion, but like, that ending was fucked up to me. Just the way, not what happened, but the way it happened. So comparing these two books, relationships being a band-aid for your own personal lacking, sex being used as a distraction from feelings, not something that feelings are incorporated into, playing a role, being performative in order. It's like this manipulation, and it's so easy to think of people who are manipulative as being evil or malicious in nature. People are just trying to get their needs met. And unfortunately, a lot of people, they've never really had a stable, that's another thing with these two books. What limited support that they do have is extremely unstable. And notice it being Beth, in half his age being her mom. Not badly intentioned, but just she has her own issues. This sort of frantic, impulsive nature to both the main characters, and I think the thing that really stood out to me the most is just the performative nature of everything, and just not feeling like they can just exist. They cannot trust that their needs will get met unless they are manipulating and orchestrating everything around it. And that's why they play their role and try to be performative about everything, because that it gives them that sense of security. They don't have any experience that would suggest that they don't have to do that. You know, we talked about Heather Lewis, who wrote Notice, took her own life. And so reading this book from Jennette McCurdy, who, you know, not the same exact issues, but also had a very traumatizing upbringing, but she is still here. I watched that interview from her recently. I mean, you never really know, but seems. She comes across like she's in a much better place, that she's doing well. And what stands out between these books is that Notice never gets to the place where everything isn't her fault. Throughout the entire story, no matter how badly other people treat her, and on some level, she has some level of awareness of like, oh, that shouldn't have happened. But it's never anybody else's fault. All of that, the blame is placed inwardly, versus half his age. Look, the book doesn't end where you're like, oh, Waldo, she's in such a great place now. That's not where the character is at. But there is this thing where I don't need to play a role. This sense of agency that I don't have to do things I don't want to do. I don't have to just play this role that I've written for myself or that other people have kind of pushed onto me. I can kind of forge my own path. And I think that's kind of the biggest difference in these characters and their approach and the way that they're moving on within the stories. Our book, written from Jennette McCurdy, she comes out of this with a sense of agency that is not about her ability to successfully trick other people. You can't control other people, but you can control yourself. In Notice, she's letting other people control her. She's allowing other people to choose the narrative about who she is and what she is, because in the moment, it feels safer to just play her role. Versus in Half His Age, where she is desperately trying to orchestrate how everybody else feels about her, how everybody else is reacting to her, what everyone else is doing in response to her, because she doesn't trust that she could get positive results any other way. You're seeking a sense of safety, but you're going about it completely wrong. I thought both of these books were very good. Half of His Age was a very interesting read. I really do enjoy Jennette McCurdy's writing. I really appreciate that she's not afraid to be unlikable in moments without leaning into this cartoonish villain arc. It's often very blunt. It doesn't shy away from realistic descriptions of sex. She's not afraid to be gross. And yeah, so I just sort of appreciate how to the point she is with her writing. Notice hit me in a much deeper way, I think, because of not just the background of the author, but I think that for me, the emotionally stunted, emotionally traumatized, I think on the back of the book it's described as a fugue state almost. In a writing in the register of an emotional fugue state. Just this execution of that was just spot on for me. Despite all the crazy things that are happening, again, there is some insane lore going on between Ingrid and her husband and their child. Remember, they had a child who is dead for reasons. There's a lot going on that is pretty extreme. But the disturbing elements of this art, it's quiet. I just felt very locked in. The way that this was written made me care about Nina very much. And I really, anytime, because the thing is that I think, well, Nina's not a real person, but Heather Lewis was. And so even though Nina is not Heather Lewis, the character might have some overlap with real experiences that she had, but it makes me terribly sad to think of this very talented woman. It's just any time people lose their battle with their mental health issues is always terribly sad. But I think in a case like this, where it wasn't just unfortunate happenstance that her brain chemicals were off, but that her trauma was induced by her father, by someone who she should have been able to trust. I can't imagine being an author who has had such incredibly dark life experiences and kind of trying to let that fuel your creativity, trying to use it in your art. And to have people, critics, respond to that not understanding or not feeling the weight of it and thinking that it's over the top or immature when you're essentially bleeding onto the paper from your own life, and to not have people understand that that's what's happening. I imagine that must have been very painful. Both of these books are good, but I think that Notice is going to hit in a deeper way. The tone is very different. It's much more serious. Half His Age has a bit of a snarky humor angle to it, but it's not in an annoying way. And it's just reading books like this, it just always makes me terribly sad. And I get that feeling of gratitude, and all the times that I was a teenager and I thought my life was so boring, and now as an adult I'm able to look back and feel immensely grateful for my boring life. It just, yeah, a sense of gratitude for if you have a good family, if you have stability and parents who love you, and be grateful. be grateful. So many people do not have those things. But yeah, I do appreciate you sticking around to this far. And just a reminder that I do have a Goodreads and an Instagram now. So if that's something that you're interested in, then those are linked in the description. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And maybe I'll see you the next time around. Bye! Notice was published posthumously. Ooh, I knew. Posthumously.